Scaling a business, like I said, is generating a lot more revenue and not really increasing your expenses. So how do you do that? Let me give you a real life, for example. I've been working with this client for a couple, 3 years now. When I first started working with them, their revenue was just under 3 million. It's a couple. And the husband he's out in the warehouse all the time and chewing out the guys in the warehouse and weren't doing it right. And then, he's always doing that, or he's fooling with accounts payable. She was doing all this, hands in the business kind of stuff. And I slowly got them more and more processes and got them more and more out of the business. And they went from about 2.9 million to 5.8 million the next year to 8.3 million last year to looking like 12 to 14 million this year.
Welcome to the Business Ownership Podcast, brought to you by Awareness Strategies, helping you navigate the waters between entrepreneurship and ownership. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedlick, and I'm super glad that you're here with us today because I am here with my most amazing guest, Cary. Cary, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Michelle.
Awesome. So give everybody the highlight of who you are and what you do for business. As I catch you off guard.
What's that?
As I catch you off guard.
No, not really. Who am I? Well, I'm a strategic business advisor in a nutshell.
Awesome.
I have a background in accounting, CPA, worked for one of the big 8 firms way back in the day. And really what I do is I help business owners take their business to the next level. Well, first we define what is next level, because a lot of people talk about next level, but like, what is it really? A lot of business owners think, well, it's making more money, making, more revenue, more money. And I say it's a different way to do business, different way to run your business, where essentially the business is run by your management team. It runs itself, where the business owner doesn't have to be in it every day. The business owner can go do the 2 things that got them to start the business, which is having a vision of what's possible, what are the possibilities out there, seizing on some, and generating revenue. So visionary revenue generator, that's the two most valuable contributions any business owner can be for his or her business. Managing accounting, managing logistics, health benefits, inventory. Most business owners were not trained in any of that. Most business owners are not very good at that. And the skill set of what it takes to be a great entrepreneur is diametrically opposed to what it takes to be a great manager. So we try and take the business owner out of management, have some management team there, and basically you document every critical function of the business. You want to document in the form of a process. And then the managers just manage the business by making sure everybody follows the process. It sounds simple. It sounds simple.
Sounds so simple.
It's getting owners to pry their hands off the business it can be a challenge.
So simple. Trying to take a cat off of something. When you're trying to throw it in the shower and it's trying to get out. That's kind of like what it's like trying to get an entrepreneur.
It's a big issue of trust for the business owner, right?
Right.
Because the business is like their baby. They've taken care, they birthed this baby, they've taken care of this baby, they've grown this baby. They want to make sure everybody takes as good a care of their baby as they do. And so when they've built an organization and they basically train their employees to only go so far because they rush in and fix it all the time. So the employees only go so far. So it's very hard for the business owner to trust that you're going to take care of my baby as well as I would. But what they don't get is they've trained, however your employees show up, for the most part, you've created a culture in your business and you've trained them to be that way. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And some people it's not going to make, no, these people are just lazy, stupid. I don't, I get called in so many times, can you come fix these idiots who work for me? And it's not the idiots. Anyway.
I did get told one time, I got two good quotes that fit into this. One is, entrepreneurialism is adult babysitting. Like it or not, get over it. That's the way it is. The second one was Elon Musk who said, if your product's ready to go out to the market, you've waited too long. And I think that applies to putting it in the hands of management or to your team in general. It's like trusting that they're going to blow something up and it's okay. Like it's going to be okay. Your ability to be able to manage chaos has been there since the beginning, and you're going to reign again.
Yeah. That's exactly right. If you wait until it's running perfectly, you probably waited too long. And managing the business through processes where you make sure everybody's following the processes gives the owner some confidence that they can step back, that the management team can step up. I mean, here's the thing. Do business owners really like the tedium of like going through accounts payable for half a day? No. I mean, they're looking at their watch, looking at their phone. They're trying to find some distraction.
Where's that
So-
pink pen? Maybe the pink pen will make this faster.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look at the skill set of what it is to be a good manager.
Mm.
You want steady pace, not the same thing over and over again. You don't want you don't be shifting gears. You don't want chaos. You want nice, boring consistency. You want to be a team player, right? If you're a manager, you're definitely a team player. And you want some structure and you want some rules. Now look at an entrepreneur. They're not so much a team player. They're fairly dominant and they pretty much insist on my way, right? Because they see what you don't see and they don't understand why the rest of the world doesn't see it. So they're kind of impatient about it, but they want my way. And they don't really like steady, boring. They hate it. Matter of fact, most of them, as you say, operate well in chaos. They can handle a lot of balls in the air at once. And they like to change gears and they like it fast paced. And rules, not so much. Don't box me in. I'll handle it when I get there, because that's what I always do. I always handle it when I get there. I don't want a bunch of rules to run me through a track and make sure I don't get into trouble. So when you look at those skill sets, how they're diametrically opposed, it makes sense now why good entrepreneurs make bad managers and why good managers make bad entrepreneurs. So rather than focus on what you don't have, what are the gifts you do have to bring the business? Being a visionary, being a revenue generator.
Love it. So talk to me about the earlier point you made was most people will focus on a revenue hit when they're thinking about getting to the next level. They're thinking about scaling their business. They tend to think, oh, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do more of it. And that's going to help me build my business.
Right.
Help me break into their brains and get that out of their head.
Right.
It's not
So when
more the
scaling
same.
a business, what is that? We need to ask questions to get people to think, because real thinking happens in questions. So what is it to scale a business, right? It means to generate a lot more revenue and not much more expense. If you just keep doing what you've been doing, you'll generate more of both. And it will require more resources, probably more people, more capital, more equipment, whatever it is you do to build that revenue. Scaling a business, like I said, is generating a lot more revenue and not really increasing your expenses. So how do you do that? Let me give you a real life, for example. I've been working with this client for a couple, 3 years now. When I first started working with them, their revenue was just under 3 million. And it's a couple. And the husband he's out in the warehouse all the time and chewing out the guys in the warehouse and weren't doing it right. And then, he's always doing that, or he's fooling with accounts payable. She was doing all this, hands in the business kind of stuff. And I slowly got them more and more processes and got them more and more out of the business. And they went from about 2.9 million to 5.8 million the next year to 8.3 million last year to looking like 12 to 14 million this year. That's called scaling a business. And they haven't increased their staff by more than, I think, 2 people. That's called scaling a business. That's
Right.
generating a lot more revenue without having to take on a whole lot more resources. Now, they did have to get a second warehouse because they had to increase their inventory to keep up with the volume. But, that's a few $1,000s a month.
That is
So-
fantastic. That's what I love to hear. Yeah, you were going to make a point and I wanted to
Well,
wait for it, but I didn't want dead air.
Yeah, the point is that that's called scaling a business. That's called taking your business to the next level, where the business is run by itself. I mean, in the process, we've elevated a couple of people that were working there into the management. So now they manage the day-to-day stuff. So they could go. I mean, listen, the guy is brilliant visionary, brilliant. Excuse me. And he's really good at generating revenue. He comes up with ideas that are just like, how'd you think of that? But they work and they make money, and then they're growing at a rate of about 50% per year, where the rest of their industry is stagnated.
Wow.
But that's what happens when you can take an entrepreneur and get them to do their most valuable contribution, right? And the best way to do that is to get them out of that, as you say, the cat's claws, getting them to let go of the day-to-day, having the business really turns like into a machine working for them. Because before they were working for the business. And that's one of the complaints I hear from a lot of entrepreneurs is, I'm working 80 to 100 hours a week. I can't take any time off. My employees just don't get it. I'm stagnated. I'm frustrated. What can I do?
Love it.
We need to,
So talk to me
build a
about the
business.
elements that you see as key in being able to do that. Because I know I talk to entrepreneurs a lot about the automation of things, and they think that that means bringing in software.
Mhm.
There's a substantial difference between automating and bringing on new software. But
Well,
we
yeah,
won't go into my issues. Go into
yeah.
what do you see as kind of those components, or address that if you want.
Well, the big thing is turning your key functions, your critical functions of the business into processes.
Awesome.
Let me
Talk
give
to
you a
me
good
about that.
example. The deck of an aircraft carrier, right? Fairly complex. I mean, they have an elevator that's bringing and lowering warplanes and what have you up from the lower decks where they're being fueled and armed and what have you. The launching with superheated steam. You have all this stuff, catching them with the guide wires. And it's on a ship that's 3 football fields long. It's pitching and rolling on the open sea. And the people, for the most part, most of the people doing doing this military precision coordination between the ages of 18 and 22. Think of most 18 to 22 years old these days. Yeah, you can't picture them on an aircraft carrier. So how do they do
Again,
that?
I'd be flying back to the mainland going, no, I'm not going to do that.
I'm not getting on that ship. No, but it's because they have a process and they drill, 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 drill. They know what they're doing. They know what everybody else is doing. They know how it works, how it all fits together. And yes, it comes off as military precision. A simpler example is take a handful of teenagers, show them the processes, and they can run a fast food restaurant, right? Because the process, everybody knows how to make the fries, everybody knows how to make the Royale with cheese, everybody knows how to make the apple pie, everybody knows how to run the register, whatever it is. And now they're bringing in automation, they're bringing in kiosks. You got to do your order on the kiosk. They're not going to waste somebody's time at the register taking your order. Anyway, so those are some examples of if you have the processes and you have them simplified enough to where people can just follow the process, management just follow the process. The business takes care of itself. You don't have to rush in and be the white knight on the horse at the end of the day, fixing everything. And to just give you some reassurance that everything is working fine, what I also do is make sure that they get a set of dashboards every week, financial key performance indicators. What's your cash look like going out the next 10 weeks? What do your receivables, payables, sales look like month to date, week to date, what have you? Is the inventory aging well? You have anything in there that's too old? If you're a contractor, what's your WIP report look like? If you're a manufacturer, what's your cost production look like? Are your taxes being filed and paid? So you get copies of your tax returns plus the online payment thing saying, yes, you paid these taxes. One thing I've seen destroy businesses before is some tax glitch happens. Somebody forgets to file a return or pay the thing or whatever. And it turns into this big snowball. Next thing you know, tax man's showing up at the door saying, I need a check for way more than you got in your bank account. And it's been I've seen it take businesses down. And that's one of the things, that's one of the most common things I've talked to business owners, like, what wakes you up at 2 o'clock in the morning? I'm hoping my taxes are being paid. It's like, well, are you checking? Are you getting copies of reports?
You're hoping?
Well, I trust the accounting people. Yeah, trust but verify, as they say. Yeah, show me the return. Show me you paid it. No problem. Tax, sales tax, especially payroll tax. The IRS gets rabid about payroll taxes.
Absolutely. Well, and talk to me about kind of how do you manage without, let's say we take an entrepreneur who's just really not good with numbers. They have that grade 4 post-traumatic stress order going on. They're like, I hate numbers. I hate spreadsheets. I don't want to see it. I don't know. It's nebulous. How do you help them to kind of transition from absolute fear to, you need to understand enough to be dangerous, but you don't need to do it.
Right. So that's called managing by the numbers. Everybody talks about it, but nobody, and most people don't really have a clue as to what that means, managing by the numbers. So that's, and part of the dashboards is that the owner and the management team meet on that together and they go over them. And I'm usually there for at least the first several of them, just to make sure they understand what it's saying and to give them my interpretation of what it's saying. And like, at what point when a receivable goes past 60 days, what percentage of receivables does that start flashing a warning sign? You have a collections problem. There's some process. Is it a customer? Is it your collection process is off? What's going on? As well as the financial statement. So monthly financial statement review, set up ratios. I explained to the owner and the management team what the ratios mean in terms of financial strength, liquidity, efficiency, and profitability, and give them some guidelines in terms of, well, your current ratio is like 1.1 to 1. The industry standard is 2 to 1. So how do we get from 1.1 to 2 to 1? Let's set some goals for the future. Let's see what we can start doing in terms of setting up your financial statements to whether, because they're basically report cards on your business. So we want really good report card, right? Balance sheet and income statement. So giving them a layman's interpretation of what the financial statements are saying about the business, in whatever ways it's saying, helps them to understand, oh, that's what that means. Because before, there's like a page with numbers. And maybe they want to look at what revenue, are we making money? Main thing is how much money's in the bank account. Because that's how most people manage their business, what's in the bank account.
Absolutely. And it's a terrible way to manage your business, I might add. I can't emphasize enough how important I think it is that somebody brings in somebody like you to be able to help them to read P&Ls and to understand what's important about it. How do you know that somebody's blowing smoke? Because my number one bane of existence is when somebody's getting taken advantage of within their own company in the financial department because they're asking information from their team and they're going, well, I just don't understand what they're saying. It's like, well, if your team is blowing smoke, you're not going to understand what they're saying. They're going to make sure that you don't understand what they're saying. And that's, to me, a very clear indication that something's wrong in Texas. And you got to go back to bringing in somebody in with like you and going, hey, what do you see going on in here? And how do I know what that really means?
Right. Yeah, I had this goes back a few years, but I had he had been a client for a number of years, and finally he had grown to the size where I helped him get a full-time CFO. And this is about, I don't know, 7 years later, he called me and he goes, something's wrong. Cash just doesn't seem right. Sales look good, our profits look good, cash just doesn't look right. And he had several operating companies, and the CFO was only fixated on one. He was letting the bookkeeper, the head bookkeeper, basically do the books on the other. Well, I began investigating the company where the cash was never right, and basically uncovered the head bookkeeper had been embezzling money to the tune of $1.7 million over the prior 5 years. That's why cash didn't look right. Yeah. So CFO was terminated. We put a lot of controls in place, internal controls in place. She was always 6 months late reconciling the bank account, and check, not all the checks were there. She was destroying checks that she made, making payable to herself, or she was making checks payable to a credit union that people could save into, and she was putting it into her account, or she's putting on her. She was gambling. She's gone on a boat and gambling. We have gambling boats.
Ouch.
Yeah, and you know what the hardest part of that was? Talking to the owner. I was finding all this stuff out, and I knew he was not going, because he loved this woman. She'd been working for him for 20 years. And so I called him and said, can we meet at your office on a Sunday morning? I have some really important stuff to show you. And it took me about an hour and a half for him to finally give me the authority to contact the credit union to, like, where's all this stuff? He's like, well, could it be a car allowance? I said, $10,000 a month. So you think it's the phone allowance? No. Well, she couldn't be stealing from me. Said, this is, yes, it's prima facie evidence that she's stealing from you. But he just couldn't believe it. And it's that whole thing of trust, that he trusted her so much that he couldn't believe she was like, I mean, even when I started looking into it, she still stole it, because it took me a few months to find a lot of this stuff, what was going on. But even when I was looking at stuff, she was still stealing $20,000, $30,000 a month for a couple of months. She knew it was being looked at, but she stole anyway.
Ouch. There's a problem in there somewhere. Well, and nothing against accountants and financial people. It's just that it happens to be one of the easiest places to look for taking money from the business. I think it is so vitally important for people to understand what their daily task is. So talk to me about the CEO and how their job changes from being the technician in the company, doing the things, to, what do I do on a daily basis? Because I've seen people who will go and talk to every single person in their business every day. And then I've seen people are like, yeah, and then I went golfing for 6 weeks. And it's like, okay, dude, there's a happy medium here. And there's tasks that need to be done, whether it's a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, but this stuff needs to get done. What are those things to you? And how do you talk to people about functioning and getting that cadence of the daily rhythm in again?
Well, it's a question of this is a question that I always work with business owners on. What is going to satisfy you? Not make you happy. I don't care about happy. Satisfy you. My mentor from 37 years ago told me one time, he said, "Do you want to know the secret to life?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." He goes, "It's getting exactly what you want, being ultimately satisfied." I was like, no kidding. He goes, "How do you do that?" I said, "I don't know. Ask for what you want." He goes, "Before that," he says, "you have to know what you want. And that takes time. That takes reflection. That takes finding some things you thought you wanted that really you don't want." My favorite example is, if you're a teenager and you first start dating, crazy looks pretty fun and exciting. But then you actually date crazy, you find that crazy ain't where it's at. I will leave skid marks getting away from crazy. So yeah, there's gonna be a lot of things, and what I get almost every time is, "Man, I'm just so tired. I'm just so tired." Yeah, it's a muscle you haven't used much. Reflecting on, what is it I want? What's gonna satisfy me in terms of revenue, in terms of profitability, in terms of content I can take off, in terms of compensation to me, in terms of the culture I want the business to be, the kind of employees I want to have, the goods and services I want to market. What's my market footprint? Can I do this online? What are all the things what is it going to take for you to be ultimately satisfied with your business? Because right now you're pretty frustrated, you're pretty resigned, you're pretty resentful, you ain't happy, and you're definitely not satisfied. So what is going to satisfy you? And from there, it's a matter of what's going to satisfy them dictates. Now, yeah, you got to get your monthly financial statements, you got to get your weekly dashboards, you got to make sure there's processes in place to run the business. And then from there, it's like, okay, you want to work 20 hours a week, or you still want to work 80 hours a week, whatever, but focus your energy on visionary revenue generation. And those two generally go together. It's in contacting your favorite clients and contacting new clients, you can find out maybe there's something new in the market that you weren't aware of that's coming on that's really popular. So focusing on, and I had one client, he had a jet. And he said his ideal week would be having a Monday morning meeting with his management team, taking off on the jet, going to see clients around the country, coming back Friday afternoon. I said, "Why aren't you doing that?" And it was that, "Well, I can't trust him to run the business." He just refused. He said, "No." And he'd rush around and chew people out, and you're not doing it my way. And he wondered why. His business kind of had stagnated because it had grown to the extent that he could handle it by himself, that he could manage everything. And what he didn't see is that for him to get bigger, for him to really scale his business, he was going to have to let his business run itself through his management team and processes, so that he could go out and have this, fly around the country in his jet and and really turn his business into something spectacular. I mean, he could have grown his business. He was so good at relationships. He could have done this business where he could have turned it into an IPO and gotten super, super wealthy.
Thanks. Well, in a moment, I'm going to ask you about a Cinderella story of one of your clients, because we've heard what can go, what does go wrong, what will go wrong. And we're going to have that Cinderella story coming right up.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.
So I am super excited to hear about a Cinderella story of one of your clients.
Okay. It's a little longish, but I'll keep it as short as I can.
I got
Uh,
coffee.
Okay, me too. I had a client who had multiple locations in South Louisiana and Texas. And he had about, I think it was around 23 acres in Houston. And it was right near the ship channel and right near I-45, which is a major thoroughfare in Houston. And he had this old cinder block plant, concrete block plant, generating about 100,000 a month, but it was breaking even. And these 23 acres was really valuable real estate. Now this goes back, I don't know, 15 years ago. And I would participate in his executive committee meetings and basically said, you know, this is an underperforming asset. The real estate's worth a lot more than breaking even on this antiquated block plant. So he turns to his COO and says, okay, make it profitable. Well, the plant was running at capacity and the pricing, there was no pricing power in Houston because everybody in his blue-eyed cousin had a block plant, right? So it went on for a couple, 3 months where the owner and the COO were having increasingly heated arguments about why aren't you making it profitable? I told you and you haven't done anything. It's like you can't do anything, you can't produce any more block. And you know, there's no pricing power down there. So there was a VP of engineering. I said, is there anything, what do you see? Are there any possibilities we can make anything there besides this antiquated block plant? Well, there's one product they were getting out of the UK. And it was a specialized product, and it took them minimum 8 weeks to get it once they ordered it because the company wouldn't source the materials to make the product until we got to order. And then you had to ship it over water to get the Houston ship channel. She said, well, if we could put together an extruder line to make this product, you know, we could actually, you know, we probably get our cost of goods sold down from, I think they were doing, the profit they were making on this thing was about 40%, which in this business, 10% was about average. So 40% was good, but if you made it yourself, you might be able to get the gross margin up to 75, 80%. Okay, I'm interested. So I said, look, get the numbers for the line together. And it turns out that the company had just been sold and they laid off some people that knew how to do the extruder line. So they hired a consultant to come over and live in Texas from the UK for a few months, put the extruder line together. Well, before that, he came to me with the numbers and he said, well, why don't we build a warehouse so we can warehouse some of this stuff in addition to just housing the equipment? I said, yeah, that's a great idea. So I think it was around a $6 million deal. And, you know, the owner just wasn't going to come up with that amount of cash. In fact, he said, well, when I went to present to the owner, he's like, well, how am I going to pay for this? I said, I can put a loan package together, get along with no problem. I said, the projection on this thing with the sale, just the sales you have now, make this thing wildly profitable. So he said, well, I don't want to go to the bank. I said, I'll go by myself. I don't care. I mean, amazingly, some business owners are scared of banks because what they're scared of is the bank's going to ask them questions about their business in terms of, well, how your margins, how's your expenses, how's your revenue, and you got to know your financial statements to do that. Anyway, so I put a loan package together, went to the bank, met with the market president and the senior VP. They approved the loan while I was sitting in the room, which is unusual because usually it has to go through credit. But they said, no, we'll push this through credit. So got the loan approved, worked with the VP of engineering on the construction and the coordination with the bank to fund the construction, got the thing up and running. That was back at the end of 2015. Yeah, okay. Anyway, the VP of engineering eventually became the COO. COO quit, I think, over the squabbling and the heated arguments over the block plant. I remained friends with the COO, and I had lunch with him probably in the last year. And I asked him, I said, well, how's things going in Houston? You know, how's the extruder line? He says, well, now we have 5 buildings and 7 extruder lines, seven lines. He says, we manufacture everything we make now. Now we have distributors for our products. We don't sell anybody else's stuff anymore. We're selling stuff to South America, Asia, and the Middle East. There was some problems with the Europe and the regulatory stuff they have. But anyway, it's like, Then I've met one of his top saleswomen, and she told me just kind of offhandedly that he had told her, this client had told her, yeah, I paid off all my debt today. And when I left, he had about $18 million of debt, which was reasonable. It wasn't like a lot of debt for him, but had paid it all off. And there was an engineering firm that had been started by two officials from the Department of Transportation that were now 90 and wanted to sell the business. He bought the whole firm. Okay, so now there's all these contracts that go through them, all the designs, bridges, roads, whatever that go through them and DOTD, he's got first look at, and he sells construction materials. So I think he's got a second jet now.
Nice. I love that. I love it so much because I think that is the precipice with which most entrepreneurs fight, is that moment where they've got things going, but the cash isn't flowing. They don't, there's no oil in the wheels. They're kind of going like, I am dredging it. I am working it. I am head down, butt up. And, a loan, how am I going to get a loan for this when I can't even afford to pay? Like, I'm terrified of payroll at the end of the month, let alone an added bill on top of that. And the stress of that is fantastic because it's them on the line. I mean, in the US, you have a benefit in that you can get business loans fairly easily, whereas the rest of the world, almost all of the rest of the world, you basically are putting your house on the line. It's yours. It's not the business's, it's your line.
Right.
But when it's done smart and you know why you're doing it, you know how you're doing it, and if the bank's looking at it and you have the numbers there that make sense to the bank, then it should make sense to you too, that like it'd be kind of silly not to make this decision right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of profit
thing
there,
was,
which oils the wheels.
right. It took a little bit of strategic thinking, a little bit of thinking outside the box. The owner was just sell more, make more block, sell more block. Well, no, that's, you're there. So what else can we do? So, we couldn't see the possibilities of 5 warehouses and 7 lines and manufacturing everything at a time. We just wanted the one extruder line with the warehouse, right? But it was in chasing that possibility, making that a reality, that all these other possibilities suddenly opened up. And that's the thing with what's going to satisfy you when you start thinking strategically, what do I want my business to look like? Once you start seeing those possibilities, other possibilities open up that you couldn't see before. Not that they weren't there. And this is what I always get back to, is that we all have a narrative, right? Your narrative is telling you, like it, don't like it, good, bad, right, wrong, make sense, don't make sense, agree, disagree, all the time. Everything that comes into your senses goes through those filters at a minimum. So whatever narrative you have, you're going to be able to see some things and you can be blind to other things. So the narrative this owner had about the Houston yard had him blind to something else, because in his mind, in his narrative, it's a block plant, happens to be in Houston, but he wasn't thinking about, well, it could be these other things, right? It's not like he was stupid. I mean, he's a very smart guy. It's just his narrative had him blinded to what's possible, and that's what happens so many times. People, well, that's just the way it is. It's instead of, well, couldn't it be something else? And you see that so many times that you'll bring up a possibility and it gets shot down immediately. Oh no, that'd be too complicated. We've tried that before. Instead of exploring, well, what would be possible? If it didn't work before, why didn't it work? What could be different this time? Anyway, I don't want to go on too much.
I could talk to you for weeks and months, but I don't want to answer everybody's questions. I want them to have the opportunity to be able to ask you some of their. So I know they're going to want to start that journey with you. How did they begin that journey?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Cary Prejean. I also have a website, strategicbusinessadvisors, plural.org. You can set up a free consultation with me there. You can read more about me. You can read about our philosophy, what we do. There's some client testimonials on there.
You also have a book, yes?
Yes. Yeah, I just published it back in May. It's called Optimize. It's not a big book. You can read it about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And what it talks about is everything we've basically been talking about today in terms of what is it to be an entrepreneur, what is it to be a leader, versus a manager, having processes, having actionable financial data, thinking strategically, planning strategically, and the whole thing about a narrative. The hard thing, well, let me say it this way. What empowers us with having a narrative is it allows us to be on automatic for the most part. We don't have to stop and think about everything like it's all brand new. Just think about if you know what food you like and every meal came up and you had to like decide what I want to eat, you didn't know anything, you had to start all over again, right? Like you had amnesia, you would be excruciating. You'd be exhausted before 10 o'clock in the morning. So it allows us to just automatically choose, but it blinds us to what else is out there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's like ordering in a foreign restaurant. I have no idea what any of this
Right,
stuff
but no,
is.
but I'm talking about choosing everything. The
I
people we
know,
like, the
but
people
a
like
lot of
what-
people don't realize that it is like going to another culture and not having a clue what's going on. Until you get into that culture shock, you don't realize how many decisions you make in a given day that are just on autopilot. Turn left, turn right. This is a
Right.
stop sign. All of those are, we've been programmed to know those things. So when it comes to running a business, I think we started on this note is that it's not about more of the same. It's about looking at things differently and taking it to a new precipice. And in order to be able to do that, you have to be able to stop, to your point, and look at how can you optimize your business, not how can you do more of the same. I love it.
Right. Exactly. What, real thinking happens in questions. Otherwise, you're just having thoughts. You're not going to have a breakthrough. You're not going to see something new, just having the same old thoughts roll around. It's always in reflection and asking questions that you begin to see new possibilities. That makes sense?
Nice.
Yes.
Absolutely. It does.
So the questions to ask yourself as business is, what don't I see here? What's possible that I've been missing? Who in the organization can help me? Who has a different perspective than me that can actually help me bounce my ideas off? And a lot of times business owners, because they're so optimistic, and somebody, they're optimistic, they see opportunity where other people see risk. So people who, the other 80% of us, who work for people, are going to see more risk. And what business owners don't want to hear is like, why are you being so negative? They're not being negative. They're telling you what they see that you may have missed. And sometimes it comes back to bite them on the butt, right? The risk they didn't plan for it. Now they work through it generally, but they could have avoided some hassle, some downtime by paying attention to that risk and mitigating it ahead of time. So
Finish your thought.
The whole thing is it's in asking questions and being patient, and instead of trying to hang a body in and find out what happened, and when things go wrong, is like, well, how can we turn this into a learning opportunity? Instead of asking, why'd you do that? Ask what happened. What was missing? Do we need to process here? Do we need to change the process that we're using? What can we learn from this? Because that's going to engender your employees too. They're going to see you as somebody that cares about them, maybe, rather than why'd you do that, which basically comes across as, what are you, stupid? So
your employees are not your children.
Well, I know, but if you talk to them like that, what do you think? What's going to happen with your employees? Are they going to be wanting to really do a great job for you? Probably not. Are they going to talk bad about you behind your back to other employees? Probably. Did you see what he did? But it's such a jerk. How about their family and their friends, and people in the community? He's I wouldn't work for him. He's a total a-hole. That kind of stuff. That's going to diminish possibilities for you. That is what called disempowering part of your narrative when you react like that.
I love it. So I know people are going to want more from you. As I mentioned earlier, they're going to want to know how to ask those questions, what questions to ask, how do you talk to people about that, all of which Cary has the answers for. So we will, of course, have all of Cary's links in the show notes. Go ahead and scroll down, click on the links, open up in a new browser because we're not done yet. So Cary, I get to ask you, at what point in life did you know you were especially kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Well, it goes back to about 1987 when I had business owners asking for my help that I didn't know. Like, yeah, so-and-so told me about you. Can you help me with my stuff too?
Right.
Yeah, that it's like, okay, so there's actually demand for what I do. And I see things a little differently. And yeah, I'm not the traditional accounting thing where it's like, okay, here's your financial statements, here's your tax return for last year, and nothing about the future. I was always more concerned about what can I do to help them about the future? How can I help them make strategic moves? Yeah, you need that reporting, but it falls short. Anyway.
I love it. I love it. So as we approach the last few minutes here, any last words for our peeps?
Learn to live in the question, especially what is going to satisfy me. Most people spend more time on this year's vacation than they do about thinking about what is going to satisfy me about my life in general. What kind of relationship, what kind of physical fitness, what kind of social life, what do you do for fun, your work, your money, everything. What's going to satisfy you? Most people walk around with, this ain't it. If only my life were more, better, different, I'd be happy. But they never define what more, different, or better is. Until you do that, you will never be satisfied. Until you declare satisfaction, you will never be satisfied.
Love it. You've been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and I know how valuable it is.
Thank you, Michelle. Wonderful to be here. Had a great conversation.
Awesome. Peeps, this is Michelle Nedelak. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. Get a hold of Cary. We love having you here.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.